The HFY warship Talon's Edge dropped out of hyperspace like a predator pouncing on wounded prey. Its weapons hummed to life, energy signatures spiking across the sensor grid as massive cannons tracked the tiny human transport vessel drifting through the void. On the command bridge, Commander Rex stood with his clawed hands clasped behind his back, watching the viewscreen with the patient hunger of a cat watching a mouse hole. Rex was impressive even by HFY standards. His spotted fur was marked with scars from a dozen campaigns, and his eyes had that cold, calculating look of someone who'd killed before and would gladly do so again. The HFY were born hunters, engineered by evolution into perfect killing machines. 6 feet of muscle, reflex, and razor-sharp instinct. Their reputation stretched across 3 sectors of space, and most species had the good sense to avoid them. "Scan complete, Commander," the tactical officer announced from his station. His claws clicked against the console as he pulled up the data. Single life form detected aboard the transport. Human. Male. No weapon signatures. No military-grade augmentations. No defensive systems active. Rex felt his ears flatten against his skull in disappointment. One human. Alone. Unarmed. Where was the challenge in that? The HFY had heard stories about humanity for years now. Tales of their warriors. Their stubbornness. Their refusal to surrender even when outmatched. Rex had been hoping for something more exciting than whatever soft civilian was bumbling through their territory. "This human crossed into HFY space," Rex said, his voice a low growl that made junior officers straighten at their posts. "That's an act of aggression. We'll make an example of him. Show the humans that they can't wander wherever they please." The communications officer tapped his console, and a human voice filled the bridge. It was calm, almost friendly, with none of the fear Rex expected to hear. "Hey there, HFY vessel. Name's Jake Cooper. I'm an independent trader hauling supplies between colonies. Pretty sure I made a navigation error somewhere along the line. My NAV computer's been acting up all week. I'm happy to turn around and get out of your space. No trouble intended." Rex's tail lashed behind him. That tone. That casual, almost conversational way of speaking. Like he was chatting with a neighbor over a fence instead of addressing a warship that could vaporize him in seconds. The audacity of it made Rex's fur bristle. Prey didn't talk to predators like they were equals. Prey cowered. Prey begged. Prey showed respect. "Human vessel," Rex said, making sure his voice carried the full weight of HFY authority. "You have violated sovereign territory. You will shut down your engines and prepare to be boarded. Any resistance will be considered an act of war and will be met with lethal force. Do you understand?" There was a pause. Then the human spoke again, still with that same irritating calm. "Yeah, I understand. No problem. My engines are already down. Boarding hatch is on the port side. I'll unlock it for you. Makes things easier." Rex bared his fangs at the view screen. "Helm, bring us alongside. Boarding team, prepare for hostile contact. I don't trust this human's cooperation." 20 minutes later, the boarding operation was complete. The HFY warriors had stormed the small transport vessel expecting traps, hidden weapons, maybe a desperate last stand. What they found instead was one human sitting in the cockpit, hands raised, wearing a patient smile. He didn't fight. Didn't run. Just stood up when ordered and let them clamp magnetic restraints around his wrists. Now he stood in the detention block, 3 levels below the bridge, surrounded by reinforced walls designed to hold the most dangerous prisoners in HFY space. Jake Cooper looked around the bare metal cell with the kind of mild interest someone might show when checking into a budget hotel. He was average height for a human, maybe 5'10", with brown hair that looked like it hadn't seen a comb in a few days. His trader's jacket was worn at the elbows and his boots were scuffed from years of use. Nothing about him screamed dangerous. Nothing about him even whispered threatening. "Enjoy your stay, human," the guard snarled as he activated the energy barrier. This particular HFY was young, maybe fresh out of military academy. His name was Len, and he was eager to prove himself. He'd heard the stories about humans, about how tough they were supposed to be, and he was disappointed by how ordinary this one looked. Jake tested the restraints, found them solid, and shrugged. He looked around the empty cell, taking in the hard metal bench, the waste disposal unit, the bare walls. Then he turned back to Len with that same relaxed expression. "Could be worse," Jake said conversationally. "At least it's clean. Hey, you guys need anything? Water? Coffee? I make pretty decent coffee. Got a stash of real beans from Earth in my cargo hold. None of that synthetic stuff." Len stared at him through the energy barrier, his ears twitching in confusion. In his 3 years of guard duty, he'd never had a prisoner offer to make him coffee. Prisoners were supposed to be scared, angry, defiant. They weren't supposed to act like they were hosting a dinner party. Jake caught his expression and smiled slightly. Just trying to be friendly. It's gonna be a long detention, right? Might as well be civil about it. 3 days crawled by aboard the Talon's Edge. Commander Rex sat in his private quarters, reviewing the daily reports from the detention block, and each one made his fur bristle with frustration. The human prisoner, Jake Cooper, hadn't cracked. Hadn't even shown the smallest sign of stress. According to the guards, he spent his time doing exercises, humming to himself, and trying to make small talk whenever someone walked past his cell. Rex had broken hardened warriors in less time. Species with natural armor and pain resistance had crumbled under HFY interrogation techniques. But this soft, average human trader just kept smiling and asking how everyone's day was going. It was insulting. Enough of this, Rex growled, slamming his hand down on the desk. Bring the human to Interrogation Room 3. Now. Interrogation Room 3 was designed for maximum psychological impact. Rex had supervised its construction personally. The lighting was a deep crimson that made everything look like it was soaked in blood. The temperature was kept just below comfortable, cold enough to make prisoners shiver but not cold enough to let them adapt. The walls were bare metal, soundproofed, with no windows or reference points. Prisoners sat in a restraint chair positioned under a harsh spotlight while interrogators circled them in the shadows. Most species broke within an hour just from the atmosphere alone. When Rex entered the room, Jake was already secured in the restraint chair, his hands locked to the armrests. But instead of looking terrified or even uncomfortable, the human was glancing around like he was touring a museum. His eyes tracked the light fixtures, studied the wall panels, even looked up at the ventilation system. Nice setup you've got here, Jake said as Rex closed the door behind him. Psychological pressure through environmental design, right? The red lighting messes with depth perception and triggers subconscious alarm responses. The cold temperature keeps me from relaxing. And I'm guessing that spotlight is positioned to make it hard for me to see you clearly when you're moving around. Classic intimidation tactics. Rex stopped in his tracks. Prisoners weren't supposed to analyze the interrogation room. They were supposed to be scared of it. He recovered quickly, circling Jake slowly with his claws extended. The metal tips clicked against the floor with each step, a sound that usually made prisoners flinch. You violated HFY sovereign territory, Rex said, his voice low and threatening. That is an act of aggression against our people. Jake nodded easily, not breaking eye contact. I did. You're absolutely right. It was a total accident. My navigation computer glitched out, but yeah, I crossed your border. That's on me. So what happens now? What's the standard protocol for something like this? The immediate admission threw Rex completely off balance. In 20 years of interrogations, suspects always denied everything at first. They lied. They made excuses. They tried to shift blame. They definitely didn't just agree with the charges and ask about procedure like they were filling out paperwork. Rex leaned forward, placing his clawed hands on the armrest of the chair, bringing his face close to Jake's. You will provide intelligence on human military installations, troop movements, defensive capabilities, everything. Jake met his eyes without flinching. Most species couldn't maintain eye contact with a HFY. Something in their predator genetics made other creatures instinctively look away. But Jake just looked back steadily, his expression calm and almost apologetic. Can't help you there, Commander, Jake said. I'm just a trader. I haul goods between colonies. Boring stuff mostly. Last shipment was industrial textiles, spare parts for mining equipment, and about 3 tons of coffee beans. Before that it was medical supplies and some farming equipment. I don't know anything about military positions. Wouldn't even know where to start. Rex bared his fangs, letting Jake get a good look at teeth that could tear through armor plating. He held the position, waiting for the fear response. The widening eyes. The quick breathing. The trembling. It always came. Jake just looked at the fangs with mild interest, like he was examining an unusual rock formation. You're not afraid, Rex said. It came out as more of a question than a statement. Jake tilted his head, considering the question seriously. Should I be? I mean, you're doing your job. I messed up and crossed into your space. You arrested me. This is all pretty straightforward, right? It's not personal. Hey, how long have you been stationed out here anyway? Must be tough being away from your homeworld for extended periods. Rex blinked. What? Just curious, Jake said, his tone conversational. Your crew seems pretty stressed from what I've seen. Long deployments do that to people. We had the same problem back when I was... He caught himself, paused for half a second. Anyway, it's rough on morale. Being away from home. Missing family. Same food every day. Same faces. Same walls. Starts to wear people down after a while. And somehow, without Rex quite understanding how it happened, he found himself talking. About crew rotations. About how High Command kept extending their patrol duration. About supply line problems that meant they'd been eating preserved rations for 6 weeks instead of fresh food. About the complaints from junior officers who hadn't seen their families in 8 months. 10 minutes passed. Then 15. Rex heard himself explaining the political situation that kept them stuck on patrol when they should have been rotated back for leave. When he finally stopped talking, he realized Jake had been listening the whole time. Not interrupting. Not arguing. Just listening with complete attention, occasionally nodding, his expression understanding and sympathetic. Rex stepped back from the chair, suddenly feeling exhausted. His muscles ached like he'd been in combat. His head felt foggy. "This interrogation is concluded," he said abruptly and left the room. Outside in the corridor, he leaned against the wall, breathing hard. What had just happened? He'd gone in there to break the human, and somehow he'd ended up pouring out his frustrations about command decisions and deployment schedules. How had the human done that? The crew quarters on the Talon's Edge were never particularly comfortable, but tonight they felt especially tense. Guard Vex sat on his bunk, staring at the wall, while his bunkmate Len tried to ignore the heavy silence between them. Finally Vex broke. "He's doing it again," Vex said, his tail twitching with agitation. Len looked up from the maintenance report he was pretending to read. "Oh, doing what?" "The human, Jake. He's doing that thing where he just talks." Vex's ears flattened. "I was on cell duty today, just walking my rounds like normal. He started asking me about my family. Wanted to know if I had cubs back home. How long since I'd seen them. Then he asked if I thought the command structure valued us as guards, or if we were just considered expendable." Len felt his fur prickle uncomfortably. He set down his data pad and scratched behind his ear, a nervous habit from cubhood. "Yeah, he does that. And now I can't stop thinking about it," Vex continued, his voice rising slightly. "It's been 6 cycles since I've heard from my mate. High Command promised regular communication channels, but they're always temporarily unavailable, or experiencing technical difficulties. My youngest cub was barely weaned when we shipped out, and now I'm missing her first words, her first steps, everything. And for what? To guard one human trader who crossed a border by accident." Len nodded slowly. The human had done the same thing to him 3 days ago. Jake had asked about his training at the military academy, seemed genuinely interested in how HFY warriors earned their ranks. Then he'd mentioned, almost as an afterthought, how some species promoted based on merit and compatibility, while others seemed to care more about family connections and political favors. It was just a casual observation. Nothing accusatory. Nothing demanding. But now Len couldn't stop noticing things he'd ignored before. Like how Commander Rex always assigned the easier patrol routes to graduates from his old academy class. How the officers who shared Rex's home district seemed to advance faster than everyone else. How Len himself, despite scoring in the top 10% of his training cohort, was still stuck on detention block duty after 3 years. "He got to you too," Vex said, watching Len's expression. "Didn't he?" "It's nothing," Len muttered, but they both knew it wasn't nothing. Down in the mess hall, Guard Tara sat with her meal tray, staring at the contents with new eyes. Yesterday she'd walked past the human cell during his feeding time. Jake had been eating the standard prisoner rations, nutrition blocks and recycled water, and he'd commented on how different military food was across species. "You ever notice," Jake had said conversationally, not even looking up from his meal, "how the officers eat better rations than you guys? I passed by the officers' mess yesterday when they were transferring me for questioning. Saw fresh meat. Actual vegetables. Real food. Meanwhile, the guards who actually do the dangerous work are eating the same recycled protein blocks as prisoners. Seems weird for a species that values warrior culture so much." He'd paused, then added, "Back home in our military the officers eat last. It's a tradition. You take care of your warriors first because they're the ones who actually fight. The ones who keep everyone safe. Leadership eats after everyone else is fed." Tara had shrugged it off at the time. But now, looking at her tray of gray protein blocks while the officers' laughter drifted from their private mess hall down the corridor, she couldn't stop thinking about it. She'd served on the Talon's Edge for 4 years. 4 years of the same tasteless rations while officers ate fresh food shipped from the homeworld. 4 years of double shifts and extended patrols while officers took regular leave. 4 years of being told she was valued as a warrior while being treated like she was disposable. The human had planted something in her mind and it was growing roots. Across the ship, similar conversations were happening. Guard Reed had mentioned to his squad mate Beth how Jake had asked about their training schedules, then casually observed that overworked soldiers made mistakes. That exhaustion led to accidents. That maybe the reason morale was low wasn't because the crew was weak, but because command was pushing them too hard. Guard Tom had spent an entire shift thinking about Jake's question. If you died tomorrow on duty, would command remember your name, or just your serial number? Jake never demanded anything. Never raised his voice. Never complained about his cell or his treatment. He just talked to whoever walked by. Asked questions. Listened to the answers with genuine attention. Made small observations that seemed harmless in the moment but stuck in people's minds like splinters, impossible to ignore. By day 7 the effects were spreading like a virus through the crew. 2 guards had gotten into a physical altercation over shift assignments, something that never happened on a disciplined HFY warship. 3 others had filed formal complaints with command about working conditions. Conversations in the crew quarters had shifted from normal military banter to quiet discussions about fairness, about whether they were truly valued, about what they were sacrificing and what they were receiving in return. Commander Rex felt it happening. Felt his control over the crew slipping through his claws like sand through an hourglass. Discipline was deteriorating. Response times were slower. Arguments were breaking out during routine operations. His officers reported increasing instances of insubordination and questioning of orders. And at the center of it all was one unarmed human sitting calmly in a detention cell, doing nothing more threatening than having conversations. Rex reviewed the security footage repeatedly, searching for evidence of some kind of mind control technology or chemical agent. But there was nothing. Just talking. Just questions. Just observations delivered in a friendly, understanding tone. It was driving Rex insane because he couldn't figure out how to stop it. You couldn't punish a prisoner for being polite. You couldn't write up a disciplinary report that said, "The human made our guards think about things." Commander Rex sat alone in his command center, surrounded by data screens showing crew efficiency reports, disciplinary records and incident logs. Every single metric was declining. His warship, once a model of HFY military precision, was falling apart from the inside. And he still couldn't understand why. Run a deep background check. Rex ordered his intelligence officer through the comm system. His voice was tight with barely controlled frustration. The human prisoner. Jake Cooper. I want everything. Every detail of his life before he started hauling cargo. Pull military records, employment history, educational background. Everything Earth has on file. The intelligence officer hesitated. Sir, we already ran a standard background check when we detained him. It came back clean. Just a civilian trader with proper licensing. I don't care about the standard check, Rex snarled. Go deeper. Access the classified databases. Use our intelligence contacts in the neutral zones. Something about this human doesn't add up, and I want to know what we're missing. An hour later, Rex's data terminal chimed with an incoming file. He opened it, and his blood turned to ice water in his veins. The file was extensive. Pages and pages of military service records, commendations, classified operation reports. Rex read through them with growing horror, his claws unconsciously digging into the armrests of his command chair hard enough to leave gouges in the metal. Jake Cooper. Former Lieutenant Colonel, Earth Psychological Operations Division. Rex's eyes scanned the specializations list, and each line made his stomach sink further. Interrogation resistance. Social network analysis. Narrative manipulation. Asymmetric psychological warfare. Cultural exploitation. Morale disruption. Advanced social engineering. The service record went on for 20 years. Jake had served in conflicts across multiple sectors. His mission reports described operations where he'd infiltrated enemy installations not with weapons, but with conversations. Where he'd dismantled military units by simply talking to soldiers. Where he'd turned cohesive fighting forces into fractured, questioning groups that collapsed from internal doubt. He'd been discharged honorably 8 years ago with full honors and enough commendations to fill a wall. Current occupation, independent trader. Rex's hands were shaking. They'd arrested a psychological warfare specialist. One of Earth's trained experts in breaking down military organizations from the inside. And they'd locked him in an enclosed space with their crew for a week. It was like capturing a biological weapon and storing it in the ventilation system. Rex stood so abruptly his chair crashed backward. He stormed out of his command center, ignoring the startled looks from bridge officers, and headed straight for the detention block. His tail lashed behind him with each step, a sign of barely contained fury. When he reached Jake's cell, the human was in the middle of a set of push-ups. His form was perfect, military precise, counting quietly to himself. 28, 29, 30. He finished the set, stood up, and grabbed a small piece of cloth to wipe the sweat from his forehead. Only then did he notice Rex standing outside the energy barrier, and he smiled in that same calm, friendly way he always did. "Commander," Jake said pleasantly. "How's your day going?" "You're military," Rex said. It came out as an accusation, sharp and cold. Jake's smile didn't falter, but something shifted in his eyes. A kind of acknowledgement. "Was military," he corrected gently. "Past tense. I retired 8 years ago. The trading thing is actually pretty nice. Less stressful, better hours, and nobody shoots at me anymore. I recommend it." "You've been manipulating my crew." Rex's voice echoed off the metal walls. "This whole time. Every conversation. Every question. You've been systematically dismantling the cohesion of my unit." Jake tilted his head, his expression thoughtful. "Have I? I've just been talking, Commander. Making conversation. It gets pretty lonely sitting in a cell by yourself all day. Your crew's been kind enough to chat with me when they walk by. They're good people actually. Work hard. Care about their jobs. Little underappreciated maybe, but solid warriors." Rex's claws extended fully, scraping against his palms. "Don't play innocent with me. You're weaponizing conversation. Using psychological warfare techniques against my soldiers." Jake sighed and sat down on the metal bench in his cell. For the first time since his arrest, he looked tired. "Look, Commander, I didn't ask to be arrested. You grabbed me, remember? I was just trying to deliver my cargo and mind my own business. You're the one who pulled me onto a warship and locked me up. That doesn't excuse." "And yeah," Jake continued, talking over him, "old habits kick in when you're in detention. Can't really turn off 20 years of training just because I'm not in uniform anymore. When you're surrounded by potential hostiles, you assess the situation. You talk to people. You listen to what they say and what they don't say. You observe patterns. You identify weak points in organizational structures. It's just what I do. It's what I was trained to do for 2 decades. He met Rex's eyes directly. "You want to know the really interesting part? I haven't lied to anyone. Not once. I haven't made up stories or planted false information. I've just asked questions and listened to the answers. Everything your crew has told me they volunteered. Every doubt they're feeling now? Those doubts were already there. I just helped them see what they were trying to ignore." Rex stared at him, fury and frustration warring with a growing sense of dread. Because Jake was right. He hadn't done anything they could formally charge him with. He just talked. And somehow that had been enough to nearly cripple a HFY warship. Commander Rex stood outside Jake's cell for what felt like an eternity. His mind raced through options, scenarios, possible solutions. None of them were good. His crew was fracturing from the inside. Warriors who'd served together for years were arguing over petty grievances. His officers were questioning command decisions. Morale had hit levels he'd never seen in his entire military career. And the worst part was that the human responsible for all of it was just standing there calmly, waiting like he had all the time in the world. The silence stretched between them, broken only by the low hum of the ship's engines and the occasional footstep of guards passing in the corridor. Finally Rex spoke, and his voice came out rougher than he intended. "What do you want?" Jake stepped closer to the energy barrier, close enough that the blue light illuminated his face. There was no triumph in his expression. No smugness. Just that same calm, patient look he'd worn since the moment they'd arrested him. "Honestly," Jake said, "I want to get back to my ship and finish delivering my cargo. I've got 3 tons of premium coffee beans that need to reach New Seattle Colony within the next 2 weeks, and they're already getting stale. My client's going to be annoyed enough about the delay as it is." Rex stared at him. "That's it? That's all you want?" "That's it." Jake shrugged, a very human gesture that looked almost apologetic. "Look, Commander, I crossed your border by accident. My navigation computer had a malfunction. I've got the diagnostic logs to prove it if you want to see them. You arrested me, which was totally within your rights. I'm not claiming you did anything wrong there. But keeping me here is hurting you more than it's hurting me. Your crew's morale is completely destroyed. You're spending resources guarding one unarmed traitor who poses no physical threat whatsoever. And for what? To make a point? To show Earth that the HFY don't tolerate border violations. Rex's ears flattened against his skull. If I release you, you'll report this incident to Earth military. They'll know we detained you. They'll know about everything that happened here. Jake actually laughed, a short, genuine sound. Why would I do that? No offense, Commander, but this whole situation is embarrassing for both of us. You arrested a civilian who got lost because his NAV computer glitched. I accidentally caused a morale crisis on a military vessel just by being polite and making conversation. Do you really think either of us wants this story getting out? He leaned against the cell wall, his posture relaxed. Think about it from my perspective. If I report this to Earth authorities, I have to explain how I, a retired military officer, ended up psychologically disrupting an entire HFY warship while technically being a prisoner. That doesn't look good for me. Makes me look like I was conducting covert operations under the cover of being a traitor. I could lose my trading license. Might even get pulled back into active service for consulting work, which is the last thing I want. Rex hadn't considered that angle. His tactical mind started turning it over, looking for the trap, the hidden agenda. But he couldn't find one. And from your perspective, Jake continued, reporting this means admitting to HFY High Command that one unarmed human nearly caused a mutiny on your ship just by having conversations with your guards. That's not exactly going to help your career prospects, is it? The words hit harder than any physical blow could have. Rex's claws dug into his palms. So here's what I'm suggesting, Jake said, his tone becoming more businesslike. Let me go. Give me back my ship, my cargo, and my trading license. I'll jump to hyperspace, deliver my coffee beans to New Seattle, and we both forget this ever happened. Clean slate. No reports filed on either side. You can tell your crew I was released due to insufficient evidence or diplomatic complications or whatever keeps your command structure happy. I'll tell anyone who asks that I had minor engine trouble and needed repairs. Everyone moves on. 30 minutes later, Jake walked through the corridors of the Talon's Edge for the last time. His restraints had been removed, his personal belongings returned, and 2 guards escorted him to the docking bay where his small transport ship waited. He'd been given back his trading license, his navigation computer had been repaired by HFY technicians, and his cargo hold was exactly as he'd left it. As Jake's ship detached from the warship and began moving away, Rex stood on the bridge watching the view screen. The small transport vessel looked fragile against the backdrop of stars, barely worth noticing. Yet that tiny ship and its single occupant had accomplished what entire battle fleets couldn't. They'd made a HFY commander second-guess everything. Commander, his intelligence officer said quietly from his station, was that wise? Letting him go. Rex didn't answer immediately. He pulled up his command terminal and began typing a report. Not the official incident report that would go to high command, that one would be heavily edited. This was for the classified HFY intelligence database, the one that tracked genuine threats across the galaxy. His claws clicked against the keyboard as he wrote, Priority alert for all HFY military units. Subject, human psychological capabilities. Assessment, severe strategic threat. Recommend extreme caution with any human detentions. Human species can weaponize basic social interaction. Military training appears to be permanent even in civilian populations. Psychological warfare skills do not diminish with retirement. He paused, then added one final line, under no circumstances detain humans for extended periods. They don't need weapons to be dangerous. They don't need to escape. They'll make you want to release them. As he transmitted the report, Rex watched Jake's ship charge its hyperspace drive. In seconds, it vanished in a flash of light, leaving only empty space behind. Rex finally understood something that would haunt him for the rest of his career. Humanity's most dangerous weapon wasn't their advanced technology or their powerful warships. It wasn't their numbers or their strategic brilliance. It was the simple fact that they could turn a conversation into a battlefield and win without firing a single shot.